Welcome to the Lord of the Rings Lorecast, the show that explores the background of Tolkien's amazing world from the very beginning. Welcome back to the Lord of the Rings Lorecast. This is your host, Tom, or Robots, and we are talking today about Episode 5, Season 2 of The Rings of Power, and I'm so glad that you are tuning in. Welcome back to the show. I promise I will get back to the very, very close reading of The Hobbit, but this show is too much fun, and I'm having too much fun taking every episode apart and looking at all the little details and things that stand out to me. So I hope you're okay with the fact that this is the focus of the show for right now. But don't worry, we'll get back to the Hobbit stuff, and who knows, maybe we'll just do 3 more weeks of these and then back to The Hobbit. And if you are tuning in for the first time, because this is a big deal and you want to check out all these different podcasts and things like that, do know that if you have questions about the lore, all the things in the background that happened in the previous age of the world before the second age, which the Rings of Power is in, all of that stuff. If you've never been able to read the Silmarillion, go back. I've got a bunch of episodes that go over all the lore in really intricate detail, but it's also very easy to listen to, as I've been told on numerous reviews of the show. So thank you to everybody for your support, and thanks for checking out the show. All right, so let's get into it. This show, it kicks off with dwarves, everybody's favorite. Everybody loves the dwarves, right? And Durin the Third has always been, I mean, they've set him up as a character who is particularly stubborn. And yes, that's a quality of all dwarves. That's just something that's kind of built into who they are. And the conflict between him and his son has been a major theme throughout all of this. I like that we're getting Durin the Fourth set up as somebody who is learning from the mistakes of his father. I'm hoping that this is not one of those character arcs that show that he also falls to those same problems. He has the same flaws. And let's talk. I'm going to dive into each of the sections of the show because it goes back and forth between these different subplots. But let's just talk about the dwarves in general, because I think there's a lot to go over here. First, we have Durin the Third using the ring for the first time that we've ever seen a dwarf use one of the 7 rings for the dwarves. And we're getting actually very specific glimpses here, when in the lore, we have just kind of these broad and vague ideas. It magnified their ability to gain wealth. It magnified their lust for wealth. All of these qualities are things that we hear about or read about, but we've never actually seen them. How does it help the dwarves magnify their wealth? Well, in this case, it gives Durin a almost, he says he can see things. Like the singers can hear the mountain, but he can see it. It's almost like he can see through the mountain. And the example we get is that we've got this kind of sound that happens as he's putting his hands over the walls and figuring out where is the best place to dig. And in this case, there's a lot of stress. In fact, we are set up to be on Durin the Fourth's side and be like, oh, that's probably not a good idea. Don't dig in that wall. We're told that it's load-bearing and that would be a problem. And then it turns out that, he pokes a hole through the side of the mountain and lets the light back in because the other holes got messed up in that previous episode, right? So, I guess part of me is like, wouldn't the dwarves have a sense of how close they were to the edge of the mountain? And how is that then a load-bearing wall if it's going to punch out into the surface? Parts of that I'm a little bit vague on, but the theme is intact. The theme that this ring is doing something, and it's doing something that is going to benefit the dwarves, but also is going to magnify those negative qualities about this individual. I also love, and this is jumping ahead a little bit, the fact that we are getting conversations between Durin the Fourth and Celebrimbor. Because in the previous season, the only one who seemed to interact with the dwarves, other than from outside the dwarves group, was Elrond. That was it. We just saw Elrond and the friendship between him and Durin. And that was great, but they are a whole society of dwarves, and they have a relationship, or at least they're building this relationship. It seems that they're becoming more and more open to a relationship with the elves, and we all know where that's going to go. And this communication between these different peoples is interesting, because this is one of those things that happens in TV shows all the time, where you have certain characters who always talk to each other, but then you have other characters who never have a conversation in the entire show, even though they are basically right next to each other. And that butts right up against the whole situation with Celebrimbor and Durin. Both of them have a certain level of skepticism and a certain amount of pride. They are actually very similar in that they both feel like there's something wrong and they can't quite pinpoint it. And when they do try to stand up against that, because they are the foils for the direction that the flow of the plot is moving, right? And this is something that the Rings of Power does a lot. Every single time there's a decision that needs to be made, there is a counterpoint. There is a foil to that decision, and a debate ensues. And it's one of the ways that they are, I guess you could say, artificially ratcheting up the tension. And it's obvious to me that they're doing this. I don't think it's too much of a knock against the series, because movies have been doing this forever. And in fact, they are pulling this ratcheting up the tension quality from Peter Jackson. There are a lot of things that this show pulls from the Peter Jackson films. And one of the things that really stands out to me is this idea that every single time there's a situation that in the books would have been like, oh, it's kind of a minor dilemma. No, it's a major dilemma, and there is a big something going on here. Every situation could be the last decision if we make the wrong decision, like that kind of thing. And they do that a lot. They also pull a number of other things from the films. I think you've probably noticed the large views and vistas and the slow pans into scenes, which this one has some really cool ones, like through the window to Disa at one point. And then also the music has, I'm sure they're pulling these little bits of melody from some of the other work. I haven't analyzed it yet, but there's a certain tonal quality and melodic quality to the way the songs have been written, and they feel like they are adjacent to the films. And all of that is on purpose. In fact, let's talk being adjacent to the films. We finally get to see that Celebrimbor was working with the mithril that shows up in the moonlight, and that was leading to the doors of Durin, which he has now crafted. And we actually have that in the show, and it is crafted and looks very, very similar to the doors that we see in the movie. And I think that's great. Like, this is putting together the pieces. This is like working out these connective points and taking the time to show us each of those connective points and how they work together. And I think that's to the show's benefit. Now, the dwarf scenes end with the situation where Durin IV is confronting his father, and his father now is being very positive with him, reinstates him as prince, and Durin IV can't really do anything about that. He's kind of been warning his father, and he's becoming more and more concerned, and he's just not going to listen. And supposedly the lesson he gets from this is, don't be like my father. And then he and Disa have a conversation, and Disa's kind of been pushing things in the direction in ways that Durin IV hasn't, but now is very concerned. And she says to him, promise me that you'll never put on the ring. And he says that he promises. I think this is foreshadowing. I think we are setting up a situation where he will feel the need to have to use the ring and then will be ensnared by it. We're getting a situation where we will be disappointed because he seems like such a nice guy. I mean, he has some of his own personality issues, and he's growing up and he's learning what he needs to do. But much like Celebrimbor, I think we're going to be disappointed. Not disappointed in the way that it was handled, but disappointed in the fact that we are rooting for the character, and the character is going to succumb to deception or the power of the ring or something like that, right? So let's talk about Celebrimbor. Let's talk about the manufacturing of these other rings and what's going on in Eregion. They pronounce it in ways that I'm always bad with the pronunciation. So Celebrimbor, I think this has been one of my concerns with the show. As soon as we saw Celebrimbor in the first season, and as soon as anybody who understands the lore realizes that he's going to be manipulated by Sauron, he's going to think that he's doing good things, but will instead be feeding into the darkness that is created and the evil that is created through these rings. We have a situation where I was always skeptical about how they would handle this. Celebrimbor comes from the line of Feanor. There's a certain level of living up to the quality of I believe it's his grandfather, because his father was Curufin, and Curufin was the fifth son of Feanor, I believe. So anyway, he comes from a very important line of elves who historically suffered from their pride and these vows, the vow that followed with Feanor and coming back into Middle Earth and searching for the Silmarils and all of that. So I totally could see ahead of time that his pride could be used against him and his want to make something at least close to the importance of the Silmarils, which of course would never be reached, but he could at least, he's shooting for something, right? And so this is an opportunity, and you can see how there is potential there for corruption and wielding those things against him. What I didn't anticipate is how detailed and how insidious the gaslighting and the playing the truth against the situation and then twisting and only lying right at the end. Those kinds of things that Sauron would be doing here. And it works. If you've been in a situation with, I've been in multiple situations where I've in my life had around me or had to work for extreme narcissists, and I have suffered dealing with their manipulations and things like that. And to the point where it has happened so much in my life that I've become acutely aware of the patterns that people with that mindset use and how effective those patterns are. And Charlie Vickers here is doing an amazing job. He is playing the victim. He's gaslighting. He's playing up things that are the truth and like saying things that are true once he gets kind of outed, but then twisting them in a way that deflects any blame from himself. It's genius, and it's really well written. The people who are writing this part of the story truly understand how that sort of language and even body language and facial expressions can be wielded against people. And we're watching as Celebrimbor is falling into this trap, even though you can see in his acting, and it's also very, very well done, that there's this, he's constantly got this warning flag, and then Sauron is noticing that, and then he's giving him an outlet to focus that warning, that feeling on, but it's the incorrect place so that he doesn't get outed. And it's so well done. And then we have a situation with he's making the rings for men, and Sauron says, well, if you're not going to help, I'll go ahead and just do it myself. And that seems suspicious, right? And so he starts working with the rest of the crew, and then the one elf woman disappears, and we see things floating around. And for a moment there, I was like, what the Harry Potter is this? Things are just floating around? Is Sauron moving things with his mind? What is going on here? That doesn't make any sense. I hope they're not moving in that direction. And then she takes the ring off and she reappears. And this scene, I think, was very smart because it showed that those rings have that quality to basically transport somebody into the world of the unseen. The problem I have with that scene is that every time we've seen this represented in the Peter Jackson movies, and it tracks pretty well with the lore in the books, not only can you see the evil creatures more clearly, but good creatures, or creatures, especially individuals who have seen the light of Valinor, are radiant and they are glowing. And the concept there, I believe, from the lore, is that the elves themselves always have kind of one foot in the unseen world in a way that mankind doesn't. And so that's why they stand out. Men typically just kind of look like shadows. They're very hard to make out in detail, but the elves are bright and glowing in this unseen world. And the fact that she could be in that situation and couldn't tell who people were and where they were, all she saw was the fire and this evil looking creature, but she couldn't tell which person it was. Maybe she was panicking and didn't really understand what was happening in that moment. But that is one point where I'm like, if they had a human in that situation to suffer that, it probably would have been better than putting an elf in that situation, because chances are an elf would be more wise to how that works. And even if she was a young elf and wasn't really wise about how that works, it seems kind of obvious that you could tell who the fiery, demonic looking thing was in the room because of where they were placed when you pulled the ring off, right? So there's a little bit of a plot hole there. I'm not going to hang my hat on it, if that's even an expression that makes any sense, because I think what's more important is that it is conveyed to the audience that these rings are corrupt. They're doing something that is intended by Sauron, and then he has to play it off. And these little problems are being discovered over time. It's not like they aren't addressing these what if situations. Well, how would you get away with creating these rings? Wouldn't people notice that there's corruption? Wouldn't they feel it? Wouldn't they try the rings out to make sure they work? They're like, if you're a smith and you're crafting things, you're going to have a very close and detailed perspective of the thing you're working on. So wouldn't they notice? And the answer is yes, they are noticing, and we're getting these justifications and these mind games that Sauron is playing in order to keep things moving forward. I think that's really the only way to handle this in a satisfactory manner. And that's the important part. Now, sure, there are some plot holes in the disappearing elf and how that really kind of coincides with the structure of the world as we've seen it. But I'm willing to give that a little bit of a pass because I think it works for the story and the character building and really defining what is happening in a situation that is probably very difficult to describe, because it is kind of a rock in a hard place. It seems like they would have figured it out. So how is Sauron that manipulative? Well, this is how. And I think they've done a good job justifying that. So there you go. That's my justification for that section. We've got the dwarves. We've got the smithing happening stuff. Oh, and I didn't go over this, but the idea that Celebrimbor wrote the letter to Gil-galad and was like, hey, everything's fine. Everything's good. No problems over here. Totally plays into a few different plots. The reason why they are not going to have an army ready to defend themselves when they get attacked. Also, the way that Sauron justifies that as that was the lie, that was the sin. He doesn't use the word sin, but that was the sin that changed the way that these rings work, and the justification that they work not just on a physical level, but a spiritual level. And so if there's something wrong with any of the smith's spirits as they make these, especially Celebrimbor, then that's going to show in the rings. And then that turns it back around on Celebrimbor, and he doesn't personify, he internalizes the idea that, oh, well, I'm the one to blame, which of course is classic gaslighting. So yeah, there you go. Those are those two sections. We've got to go thank our patrons, and I'll be right back after that in order to go over the other details, because we've got Numenor to talk about and some other things. So don't go anywhere. It's time for that spring reset. I'm taking a look at everything in my closet and figuring out that, oh no, this absolutely needs to go. And it's about time I replace things so that my clothes aren't older than my 15-year-old. Now you might think that they lasted that long because they were well made, but no, they're in terrible condition. Unlike the new jeans I just got from Quince. Jeans have always been my personal go-to because you can kind of wear them for lots of different things, but maybe they're not your thing. Maybe you're looking for, 100% European linen with insanely soft flow knit activewear fabric. It's definitely getting warmer, and their flow knit activewear is moisture wicking, anti-odor, and soft enough that you'll actually want to wear it every day. So pick out what you want. You can't go wrong because they have prices 50 to 60% less than similar brands. And like I said before, they are high quality. I continue to wear their clothes all the time, and I know that these new jeans are going to last me a lot better than the other things in my wardrobe. And on top of it, they look great. They're so comfortable, and I spent just as much on the jeans that I am now cleaning out of my wardrobe. So if you're looking for something better, just all around better, go check out Quince. So go do it right now. Refresh your wardrobe with Quince. Go to quince.com/ringslore for free shipping and 365-day returns. Now available in Canada too. Go to quince.com/ringslore for free shipping and 365-day returns. Quince.com/ringslore. All right, we're in the middle of the show. This is where we get to thank our patrons and shout out our newest patrons. I don't remember who I left off with last week because I've been changing the schedule around and when I record these things. I'm pretty sure I left off, I think I thanked Drew last time. And then now we've got Benjamin F, Kate C, Pete G, Saruman the Stinky. Did I call you out last time? I don't remember. Amy O, Florian O, and Luke W. Welcome to the Patreon. Thank you for signing up. And if you get a double shout out, you get a double shout out because I didn't write down who I stopped with last time because I've been changing up the days. Anyway, thanks for being here. If you're interested in helping to support the show, if you are interested in a bonus episode for every main episode that goes up, and that is over 100 different bonus episodes where we go into even greater detail about all sorts of things, answer questions. There's tons of stuff that you can get on Patreon, patreon.com/LOTR Lorecast. Go check it out. Plus you can get ad-free episodes. You can even sign up for free just to kind of stay in the loop with announcements and things that happen. And Patreon is adding a new feature where I can individually price episodes. So if I wanted to put a price tag on each individual bonus episode, then if you're only interested in like one or two of them, you could save money by just purchasing those one or two episodes. So let me know if you think that's a good idea. I don't want to nickel and dime everybody, but if it's a feature that seems like something that would be beneficial, then I'm happy to set that up. So let me know. Also, we have to shout out our VIP patrons. Here we go. AK Music Lover, Apollo, Aragorn III, Atley Morton, Azel Razzle, Barney D, Bo, Brandy D, Cutter Metalworks, Daniel Nightweaver, David S, David M, Divine Madman, Fulcrum, Gerald CFC, Gimli a Break, Greg, J-Dub, Gemma D, Jezer, Katie S, Capenna, Lori B, Mason Weathertop, Nick K, Nostrils of Sauron, Richard J, Rivqua, Rosie Rose, Sam B, Saruman the Stinky, TJT, and Tour Son of Hoor. Thank you so much for all of your support. And if you leave a 5-star review on Apple Podcasts, I'll read out your reviews just like these people. This one was left by One-Eyed Odin in the US, who writes, Robots Radio LOTR. I tried to read the book years ago, but found it difficult to follow. But listening to this podcast has allowed me to connect the dots. Well, thanks. Short and sweet. I'm glad you're enjoying it. Then this one comes from 2 Tenths Down in Canada, who writes, loving the outline of this podcast. It paints the Middle-earth world so vividly. I've already recommended it to friends. Oh, I really do appreciate that. Word of mouth is the best way to help grow this for me. And if you have friends who are into the show or anything like that, please take a moment to just recommend it and see what they think. Then also this one from Benji F in Australia, who writes, informative and passionate. This is an amazingly passionate, respectful, and informative podcast for all LOTR fans. Tom or Robot's passion and knowledge shine through every episode. Tom, I am blown away by your passion and knowledge, the respect you carry for this singular author and work. The complexity you demystify and the emotion you pour into each episode is moving and addictive. It's not a simple retelling of the story of Middle-earth, but a journey across the fantastical universe, which you so rightly point out can really teach us a lot. You have expertly dissected the Silmarillion, and I'm so moved by your recount of these events. You pause and let us feel. You don't rush through blurting out names in Elvish. You've really taken me on a personal journey through this world. Could not speak highly enough of this series. You're amazing. No, Benji, you're amazing. Thank you so much. Such kind words. I really do appreciate it. Compliments like this really do make my day, and with all the negativity out on the internet, they help. They help for sure. So thank you so much. If you want to help the show out in other ways, then of course share it with your friends, or you can rate the show on Spotify or whatever platform you're listening to this on, and join us on the Robots Radio Discord. I'd love to hear some of your thoughts about everything. All right, let's move on with the rest of the episode. It is time to talk about Numenor, and we are finally back in Numenor, and I think that they're doing this really well. You know how you can tell? Because the bad guys, the people who are pushing their own agenda, are Pharazôn and his, we'll call them lackeys. That's always a fun word, right? They make us upset. They make me upset. I want to punch some of these people in the face. And they do terrible things. And they are, so let's go through the scenes, right? We've got Miriel and Elendil, and Miriel is, I love that there's this little bit of romantic tension every time they talk. It's just kind of peppered in there. We don't see like a hug or a kiss or even the slightest touch, barely at all. It's very subtle. And yet there's this mutual respect between the two of them. And there's wisdom. I love that we're seeing the wisdom come through Miriel. The fact that she can't see means that she can see even better. It's one of those fantasy kind of tropes at this point, but it tracks, right? And she warns Elendil to hold back, to wait, and that there's wisdom in waiting. And I love that. And then we end up with the scene where he and the rest of his crew and all these people are basically getting kicked out of the military because they don't side with the right side. And for somebody like Elendil, who has served Numenor for his life, this is the lowest blow. I mean, he's suffered what he believes to be the death of a child already. And here he is in public being humiliated and stripped of his rank. And you would imagine that he has every right in that situation to be absolutely pissed off, to at least tell everyone off, and leave and storm out, or maybe to punch them in the face, but he doesn't. And that garners him even more goodwill by the rest of these individuals who are going through the same thing he is. And they say to him that he's their captain anyway. This is foreshadowing. This is foreshadowing of how the faithful are going to rally around him as their leader, and why he ends up in a very powerful position. And spoilers, if you don't know the lore in the background, so just jump ahead like 10 or 15 seconds, but he becomes the king of Gondor and Arnor, and he's going to show why. We're going to see this develop. And then, so the people stand up for him, and the situation plays out, and we get this moment with like our Pharazôn after that, looking at the Palantir, which is of course ironic because he uses the use of the Palantir against the public favor of Miriel. And we know what he's going to see on the other side there. He's going to see terrible, terrible things, which are going to spur him into action to send a military to Middle-earth. And they're setting it up. They're setting up for the big battle that's going to happen, where Eregion falls and the Númenóreans show up to oppose the forces of, well, Adar at this point, but it's really Sauron manipulating them. And we're going to see the situation where Sauron bows his head and gets taken captive by the Númenóreans in order to continue their corruption. It's going to happen. But first, at least according to the lore, Sauron has to finish making the One Ring, and he has to use the fires of Mount Doom in order to do that. So how he gets from one place to another to then be captured by the Númenóreans, I'm not sure how they're going to set that up. My guess here is that they're going to rearrange the order of things, similar to the way they rearranged the order of which rings were created when, because they started with the elves, but that's not actually how that works. They're going to rearrange this, and he's not going to actually make the final ring until he returns back to Middle-earth from Numenor. That'd be my guess. Otherwise, I'm not sure how they make that work, because he's not just going to teleport around. So hopefully, at least that's the case. Hopefully we don't get a end of the end of the Song of Ice and Fire, the Game of Thrones show, where like the last 2 seasons, everyone just teleported everywhere. And it's like, we just spent 5 seasons explaining how big Westeros is and how long it takes people to move from one location to another. But now all of a sudden everyone just teleports. And sure, sometimes they're flying dragons, but most of the time they weren't. That's weird, right? So hopefully we don't get one of those situations. But I love the fact that we are learning to hate our Pharazôn and the people who are kind of working for him. But then we end up with the situation at the end where they're in the temple, and of course they are told that the temple's going to be destroyed for an aqueduct to come through. It's kind of like it's the Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy joke of like Arthur Dent's house is going to be destroyed in order to make room for a freeway, and then Earth is going to get destroyed to make room for a freeway, an intergalactic one. It's the same kind of thing. Like, oh, this important place is going to be destroyed for something that makes things go from one place to another, an aqueduct. Anyway, I mean, they could have said roads or something, but that would have been really on the nose. I don't think that the authors had that in mind when they wrote this. What I think is that it's just kind of funny. So we've got that situation. And then, of course, I forget the guy's name, our Pharazôn's son, who starts with a K, Carrick or something like that. I clearly don't like him enough to even look that up right now. So I'm just not going to look it up. But we have the situation where there's tension in the temple. And then that is finally where Elendil snaps and attempts to fight back because it's an affront not to him, but to his gods and to the core point of the faithful. He knows that this is an ill omen and that bad things will come of it. And then we have the conflict and then the death of the other character, who I do like, and who is a good guy. And the scene where Elendil is like holding him in his arms and calls him son because he's become this. And they've only shown it through little glimpses, but we know from the first season that there was already a relationship there. They already knew each other. And he's kind of a stand-in for what Elendil believes to be Isildur's death, and he's the closest thing he has to a son left. Now, that raises questions, though, because Isildur has a brother. Like, where is he? Anarion is just kind of missing in action, and it's a little bit strange, but it allows us to have this interesting moment where Elendil is motivated at this point by both the destruction of this temple, his own it's not really embarrassment, but his own affront when being, unranked, deranked, whatever the word for that is. And then also the death of this other individual who he cared about. This is going to build up to a organized response by the faithful, and it will eventually lead to them leaving Numenor, but not until some other events happen. I think Isildur is going to end up back in Numenor. I think Elendil is going to end up back in Numenor. We have to have the whole situation with the corruption of our Pharazôn by Sauron. Once Sauron is taken captive, we have to have the rise of the Morgoth cult in Numenor, which is this stuff that's already happening turned up to 11. And then we have to have the covert response to those things, like the planting of the tree, the white tree. All of that stuff still needs to happen and hasn't happened yet. So I think we're going to see Elendil not necessarily leave and go to Middle Earth and kind of go with people who were evacuating the island yet. I don't think that's going to happen yet. We're going to have him working with some of the faithful and the covert actions they will be taking. And then we have the last little bit of detail here. They've talked about the rings for men, and we have to speculate about who's going to be getting these rings, some of these rings have to be going to characters that we have seen before. So I think Ar-Pharazôn's son is absolutely going to get one of the rings, and maybe he becomes the Witch King. I think there might be the seeds of that kind of formulating. As for who gets the other rings, I'm not sure yet. I think that we will end up with characters that get revealed or all of a sudden come to the forefront probably in short order, so that some of these individuals will make sense. And that reminds me, we have the scene with the dwarves all kind of gathered around looking at their rings, or at least the emissaries from these different dwarf lords. And this is the closest we've ever gotten to seeing all of the dwarf clans all together. And especially like their kings, which we haven't seen yet. These are all emissaries. These aren't the kings themselves. And then that leads back to Durin and his corruption and his asking for half of the wealth that the rings bring to these other groups, I believe is how that's supposed to work. And that seems a little ridiculous, which when they decide to go with it will make it seem even more terrible, I think is the reason why they're setting that up that way. But there you go. Those are my thoughts. I end it with a but there you go. Let me know your thoughts as well. And some of the acting in this is just killing it. Oh, and the final scene where Galadriel, we'll finally see a little bit more about Galadriel. She's let go. Oh, and we have to talk about hair. I forgot about this. We got to talk about hair. I'm not ending yet. Galadriel's hair almost gets cut. Before that, the elf woman who was turned invisible, who Sauron starts talking to, and then compliments because he says she reminds him of her. Who? Galadriel. It's a compliment about the hair, and it has to go to this idea that Galadriel's hair is a mix of golden and silver, much like the trees from Valinor, because her hair seemed to absorb some of the light or something like that, right? That's how the lore goes. And on top of that, Feanor wanted a strand of Galadriel's hair, and she refused. This is a scene where Sauron is in some ways referencing that by complimenting this woman who also happens to have this similar kind of hair, as saying that she looks like Galadriel. Well, that's a situation that seems kind of parallel, because she would be a woman who's kind of like Galadriel, working with the grandson of Feanor. So there's some connection there. But then the orcs try to cut Galadriel's hair, and Adar stops them, which plays into this as well, because this is something that Galadriel would not give even Feanor, who was the greatest of the elves in his day. And then we see this play out later in The Lord of the Rings when Gimli asks, and she gives him 3 strands of her hair. And it's so good. It moves me every time I think about, like, Gimli was worthy, but Feanor wasn't. And that's so cool. But it plays up the importance of her character. I think that there's a certain esteem given to Galadriel because she is an old and wise elf. Although some people would say that she seems to, we discussed this in the last episode, act more like a teenager. But I think there is a modicum of respect. And I think it's one of those things, like the question of, like, why did she just get to pick up a ring and have one and nobody debated it? I think that the answer to that question is because everyone knows that Galadriel is one of the oldest and wisest of the elves that is still in Middle-earth, that her status is not in question. She doesn't need to explain that part. She just has to explain some of her decisions, which have come into question and have led to some bad things happening. So that's why you have some of that stuff. But the other thing here is Sauron mentioning that she looks like Galadriel makes me wonder if there isn't a little bit of Sauron that is romantically interested, or maybe more sinisterly ways interested in Galadriel. And before you jump on top of this and you go, well, he's a Maiar, why would he be romantically interested in an elf? This isn't the first time that happened. I mean, we've got Melian and Thingol and in the First Age, and that created a very interesting union that has been the cornerstone of the line of Numenor and Elrond himself and all sorts of other things. So there you go. And if you have any questions about the lineage, go back and listen to that episode. That's actually, I think it's one of the bonus episodes. So if you want access to the bonus episodes, you can go check those out on Patreon. And I go over the lineage of all the different elves and dwarves and all those things. That's one of the sets of episodes that's out there. But in short, Elrond wouldn't exist if it wasn't for a Maiar and an elf getting together for multiple generations back in his family history, which means that some percentage of Elrond is Maiar, which is kind of cool to think about. So, also the Kings of Numenor, which is cool too. Anyway, I could go on about this stuff forever, but thank you for tuning in. Thanks for being here. And I'll be back next week with another recap of the Rings of Power episode 6. We only have 3 left and then we're done. And then I'm back to the Hobbit again. I hope that that's okay for those of you who are sticking around for the Hobbit stuff, but this stuff is so much more important because you talk about it now and then 3 weeks from now, everyone's going to be on to something else. So thanks for being here. Thank you for your support. I'll see you next time. Thanks for listening to the Lord of the Rings Lorecast. If you'd like to learn more about other fantasy worlds, check out my other podcasts, The Elder Scrolls Lorecast, The Witcher Lorecast, and more at robotsradio.net. If you'd like to reach out, I'd love to hear from you. Send me a note on Twitter at robots_radio or join our amazing community on the Robots Radio Discord. There are links in the show notes, or just search Robots Radio Discord or find the link on robotsradio.net. I'll see you next time.